Let us pray. God, we are grateful to you for our civil and religious liberties. We thank you for this great city that we get to call home. We ask, God, that you would continue to be with our policemen that keep us safe, be with our firefighters as they serve and protect us, be with the city staff, Lord, as they do their best to promote the growth and the welfare of our citizens. We pray for our schools, Lord, that you continue to bless them as they educate our children, working with parents. We pray, Lord, for churches, that you would continue to bless them as well, Lord, and for businesses. We ask, God, that you would grant unto us peace, hope, and love. And God, we ask that you would help us to be working together and care about people that we serve in our community. And God, would you give each council member wisdom and judgment, humility and ability, transparency and service. We could thank you, God, for Jesus Christ, who came to this earth and suffered and died for our sins, was buried in the tomb, and rose from the dead on the third day. We ask, God, that we will continue to serve you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. It is 5:30, November 7th, 2022, and we'll call this meeting the Fergus Falls City Council order. Roll call, please.
Fish.
Here.
Bigford.
Here.
Tony.
Here.
Rupert.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Arneson.
Here.
Gustafson.
Here.
Hicks.
Here. We have a quorum. First item of business this evening is the approval of the agenda, and I will call on our city administrator, Andrew Bremseth.
Yeah, good evening, Your Honor, council members. Hope you're all doing well. We have had a request to remove item number 8 from the consent agenda for discussion. Other than that, the agenda should be approved as presented.
Thank you, Andrew. With that, I would entertain a motion approving the agenda.
I'll offer that.
Thank you, Krista.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jim. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. There are no public hearings this evening, and there are no bids to award. Under petitions and communications, tonight we will look for a resolution to accept a $333,333.33 donation from the Frank W. Vadine Charitable Trust for deposit to the Capital Improvements Operations Fund for the Downtown Riverfront Phase 2 project, and authorize the acceptance of future fundraising donations for this same project. Someone like to offer that resolution?
I'll make that.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Caroline. Andrew, do you have anything to add to that?
The only comment, Your Honor, council members, I'd make is just reminding you that the Vadine Trust has pledged $1 million, and this is obviously one of 3 payments, and we expect the other 2 to come over the next 2 years.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I would just like to say thank you to the people that worked so hard to worked with the Vadine Trust to get these funds for the city. It's a great example of working with our philanthropic organizations to make our community a better place.
You bet. Good point, Tom. Thank you. Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Fish.
Yes.
Bigford.
Yes.
Tony.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Arneson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Under the consent agenda tonight, there are 7 items. If anyone, it's a reminder, we are removing item number 8 for discussion. If anyone would like to discuss any of the other items on there, we can remove them at this time. Seeing none, I would look for a resolution approving the remaining 7 items.
I'll offer that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Tom.
I'll second.
Thank you, Krista. Roll call, please.
Fish.
Yes.
Bigford.
Yes.
Tony.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Arneson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Item 8 is a resolution approving a conditional use permit to the Welcome House to house over 5 and up to 10 people in a home zoned R4 at 314 West Cabor Avenue. I know that Tammy Anderson and Bud Nornis, I believe, would like to speak to it, but I'll allow our Community Development Manager, Clara Beck, to briefly get us up to speed on that resolution. Good evening, Clara.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you. Yes, this is a recommendation that's coming to you from the Planning Commission. The recommendation is to approve a conditional use permit for up to 10 people to live at 314 West Cavour Avenue. The Welcome House purchased that property back in 2021, has been doing some updates to the inside of it. They will have space for up to 10 people in order to cash flow the operation that they will have running in the home, which is to be a sober home. They will need to have more than 5 people, which is the amount that's allowed under our current zoning code. So the conditional use permit was to go above that 5-person limit and have up to 10 people in the home. Again, Planning Commission is recommending that council does approve that. There are some conditions in place, one of which would be that any signs are smaller than or within a 2-by-2 foot size, that the home would comply with all local and state codes and rules. And I think those are the only 2 conditions that we've placed on it, but that is a recommendation that's come to you from Planning Commission. We did have at least one community member who spoke to, or who sent in words to the Planning Commission that got read at the meeting. We had nobody in the audience to speak to it, but the words that were sent in were supportive. It was a neighbor who's next to Lake Region Halfway House. They said that they've enjoyed living next to a non-traditional home, and that they see no reason why another non-traditional home shouldn't be in the same neighborhood. We did receive staff comments as well. The staff comments are from our fire department that address the need for a sprinkler system at the home. So that is part of the condition, that the home would be sprinkled, which is where the federal and state regulations come into play.
Thank you, Clara. Tammy, would you like to address the issue before the council takes it up?
I'm shorter. Hello, and thank you for having me tonight. I'm Tammy Anderson. I'm helping with the project at Welcome House, and thank you for all you're trying to do to help us make this happen. And I just have a few comments. Addiction doesn't discriminate. It's an equal opportunity destroyer of lives, and I think all of you know that. You probably all know somebody who struggled with addiction. And as Clara mentioned, Welcome House purchased this beautiful house. It's actually the former house of Trinity, where the pastor lived, parsonage. So it's always been a house of caring for others. And so Welcome House is excited about that. And the house will focus on peer supports as well as connecting the women to already resources in the community. So it's not a question of if any of you believe in the project. We know that you do. Our issue lies with the sprinkler system. And so the requirement is, and we've done estimates, and it's like $50,000 for the sprinkler system. But the thing I can't get answered, the question we can't get answered is, we're literally the only ones in the whole entire state that's a sober home that's been asked to do this. And we can't figure out why we are the only ones who are asked to do that. So that's really our main question, because $50,000 could go a long ways towards the program. And of course, we care about fire safety. The house will be a member of the Minnesota Association of Sober Homes. They actually do safety. They come yearly. Our house will be accredited. We also will be overseen by the Department of Health. And then, of course, we want to partner with the local fire department. So it's not like we don't care about fire safety. Of course we do. This just doesn't seem like a reasonable accommodation. And the reason that this popped up a lot in other sober houses is because of the federal fair housing, and that states individuals in recovery are a protected class for the purpose of accessing housing. A recovery home or sober home is a group of individuals who choose to live together as a single family unit to support each other in recovery. So just like the city wouldn't ask you to put a sprinkler system in because it's your family dwelling, the same is true of our home. So I would just encourage some conversation, so that's not a barrier to opening this house, because it's a huge chunk of our budget that we're trying to raise as a nonprofit. And we're trying to help people, and we have a waiting list. So the longer we wait, we have people that literally get released from treatment to nowhere. And then, chances are they're going to fall back into their same struggles that they had. So appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you, Tammy.
Just to
Go ahead.
clarify, so the conditional use permit is to allow over 5 people. The Welcome House is able to operate with up to 5 people at this time. So the permit would not be holding up any opening, just to be clear.
Sure. Okay, thank you, Clara. And the conditional use permit is over 5 and then
Up to
would
10.
require a sprinkler system as part of the conditions for over 5. Okay. I know there's been discussion on this. Chief, did you want to talk to put you on the spot? I know you've been in discussions leading up to the conditions that were set forth in the Planning Commission.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and also to Tammy's points. I mean, we are excited to see something like this come into our community because it is a need. You know, I do stand in front of you that this hasn't been a topic that's been handled lightly. We have our state resources that we lean on, which is the state fire marshal's office, but then also this falls under the building code, building department, and that falls under the Department of Labor and Industry. So building and fire codes, when it comes to an R3 occupancy, parallel each other. And when we go from an R3 dwelling unit, which is a single family home, to what is coming to be a sober home, it is classified as an R3 occupancy. And as you can imagine, we go up and down the flagpole with our state partners on helping us define this. And this was also brought to us by a designer here locally that classified it as an R3 occupancy and not an R3 dwelling unit, which again is what drives that fire suppression system. There is mechanisms in place for when we are the local code or code enforcement, you know, then we review a plan and say, yep, this is good, or here's where the designer's at. We reach out to our state partners. There is avenues that way at the state level. There's an appeal process through the Department of Labor and Industry when it comes to building code, which it would have to suffice within that appeals process there. And then also with the state fire code, there is a variance procedure which that can be presented to this body here with choosing in a sense to send it to the state fire marshal's office for review. This project has been on the state's radar on both departments, both the state fire marshal's office along with the Department of Labor and Industry, and it does come back to us stating that it has been classified correctly, which then requires a fire suppression system. What I agree with Tammy, what we can't answer and what I don't know the answer to is why this sober home in the state of Minnesota says it needs a sprinkler system. This is an example of a much bigger thing than what just is presented here today within the state of Minnesota as to how things are classified for where people are staying. So where it stands through our code process, I'll speak for Jason Schutzley on the building official side of it, is we have the building and the fire code currently that are parallel with this, and both state that it needs a fire suppression system.
Thank you, Chief.
I have a question. We have other homes here in town that have more than 5, and they don't have a sprinkler system. Were they grandfathered in then under the old, or how does that work?
So it uses the word grandfather very cautiously, but when it was come to be is what the code said that is required at that time. You know, so when we review a project that's in front of us today, we're looking at the code that's adopted by our governing body, by us today. Yep.
So the buildings that he's talking about that are grandfathered in, if they switch ownership, are they going to be required to, I mean, is it just the building that's grandfathered in, or is it left that way just because of the ownership? If the ownership were to change, would they be required to do the same thing?
It's a good question.
We would take
Yeah.
that under review. I mean, it would depend upon if the use continued, what the purpose of the transfer and ownership. I mean, I don't want to state a future position that we would take on it. We would review it and then make a final decision in that regard. But it's something it's an interesting question that hasn't posed itself.
Justin.
Maybe a point of clarification. If I understood it right, I think they could go ahead and operate as is. The kind of triggering point, is it because they're wanting 10 versus 5, or either way, would it require this?
5, at
If
5,
it's
they
greater
can
than
operate it.
5 is what triggers us into the suppression system.
And is that because you had said it's a owner occupancy? If it was just an owner and not the occupancy portion, could they have 10 and then not need the water system?
The occupancy, because in a sense, how it was reviewed is that it goes from an R3, what they call an R3 dwelling unit, which is, you know, a home that a family would live in. And I hear Tammy, and we've read through the sober house thing, that they live as a family unit as well. But as it sits, as we read through the code, an R3 dwelling unit versus an R3 occupancy. And that's where that driving piece is, that it's not an R3 dwelling unit, which is up to 5. It's an R3 occupancy, which greater than 5 requires a suppression system.
That is, maybe as a follow-up would be, you said there is an appeal process. Can you talk about what that looks like time-wise and timeframe, and what would need to be met to get through that, and or if this would even be, if this has been challenged before and somebody won?
I don't know of a challenge. I mean, there's appeals built into a lot of things for good reason, you know, so things can be reviewed and through a fair process. Timeline, I can't stand in front of you today to say what would be, you know, if it was reviewed today. You know, Ralph maybe have some indication
Yeah,
there.
basically, I was the one that sent a letter to the Welcome House, and then I provided them the application for an appeal if they wanted to appeal the decision of the building official. So the process is they complete this application. We do not have an appeals procedure here in the city, so the appeal is directly to the Department of Labor and Industry. They're a state appeal board. They meet occasionally and have a schedule. So once the appeal is, if they send in an appeal, once it's sent into the state then takes over on scheduling it, and I don't even have any idea what kind of timeline the state would have in that regard, but that's the process. Is here's the application and you send it to these folks.
I mean, I certainly, just the last thing I'll say, and I'll be quiet for others to join in, but it sounds like this is the only facility in the state of Minnesota that variance should hold up, where they would be able to allow and participate under, I mean, if they're the only ones in the state. But I understand from the standpoint of paralleling with the state governing body and the local that, I mean, I want to support that, but maybe I'm wrong. But I feel like if there's a variance process to go forward, I think they should explore it.
Yeah, Claire, did you?
Well, just, so we've sat down with Welcome House. We had a representative from MASH with us as well, which is the Minnesota Association of Sober Homes. And we did answer that question of why is this the only house? And it comes down to the design of the home and the direction that the building code is taking based on those designs. So the assumption with other sober homes is that they are opening in other communities with fewer people, but also opening simply as a home rather than as a congregate living facility. And the plans for 314 West Cavour are very clearly a congregate living facility, which is where the fire suppression system is then coming into play.
Thank you.
Tom?
I guess my my question is for Rolf. First of all, I mean, we can't supersede state building code, can
We can interpret it, and if you disagree with our interpretation, you can appeal it to the state, and that's the appeal process.
Okay.
And they can come back and say, no, building official, you are not interpreting it correctly.
Sure. Okay.
So, and that's the process.
Yeah. And it's a great cause, obviously. I mean, we all want to see it succeed and go through. It's a tough situation when you're, up against. Yeah. Have there been homes like the proposed one that have been built recently that were granted an exception or a waiver?
I can speak to that.
Thank you, Chief.
In most, I don't know any that have been built. The only one I know that has a sprinkler system is one that they happened to purchase that it had one in it. The rest are in a house, or the closest one to us is Perham 180, which I helped start that one. It's a little set up a little different, but they're still attached, and we would still be called the same thing. I kind of feel like we're just classified wrong because we are a house dwelling, like a family unit. So part of me thinks that we're just, it's a whole classification of who we are. But Brainerd just went through this, not with sprinkler systems, but just with cities trying to figure out how to navigate sober homes. Because, you know, this isn't something that happens every day, so we're kind of learning together as we go. But I just want a quote from the city of Brainerd. So the city council directed the planning commission to put together proposed regulations for sober homes. But because those recovering from chemical dependency are considered disabled under the Federal Fair Housing Act, municipalities are required to make reasonable accommodations for sober homes, limiting the local control they have over the facilities. Which sprinkler systems, again, it's a reasonable accommodation that we're asking from the city. But where does the federal play into the city? I always thought federal was trumped city.
Well, yeah, it's really not an issue of, I don't think you can give up the point of following the building codes, and that's the question.
So is our,
A reasonable accommodation is not just throw the building codes out the window.
I'm not saying you do, but as Fergus has that strict a building codes over every other city in the whole entire state?
We have the state building code, and that's what we follow.
But I understand that, but why then are we the only sober house? Because other sober houses are, that I've called literally all the ones in MASH, which are 60 or plus.
Yep.
We are the only ones, and some of them are new. They've been open a year, some have been open 10, some have been open 2.
As I understand it, though, it's the classification that you fall under the state building code. And and that rightly or wrongly, what you're doing is that classification is what's tripping you up on this whole thing.
But a lot of them have more than 5 too. It's not just we're the only ones in the state who have 10 people.
Right.
So again, that I still haven't got the answer. Why are we literally the only ones in the whole entire state?
They said something about the design of the home was the reason why. Isn't that what I heard? I mean, is it this building that compartmentalized where it's, in the case of a fire, it's harder for people to get out compared to a newer designed home where things are wider, open up, and easier for people to get out of a home? Is that part of the reason why?
It's a 5-bedroom big house.
Yeah, I know.
You know, but
5-bedroom houses today are built a heck of a lot different than they were when this building was
Right.
built. I'm just curious if the design element of this particular house is the reason why this is being asked to be done the way it is. Because, I mean, I've got an old house, and when I went, you get some of these houses where the hallways are only 3 feet wide, or the staircases are only 2 feet wide. You know, I mean, is there much in the design of this house which is causing that problem, where you have to have a sprinkler system in order to be able to get people out safely, or is it the newer houses have wider doors, wider hallways, more open access to get out of a house in case of a fire?
I think we fall under all of the width and window, you know, if we have to put ladders in, but we haven't had any of that. The guys have come through and they're capable people of, you know, they're not wheelchair bound or have mobility issues. But.
I think the question is whether to grant the conditional use permit and that it's subject to all laws. And I don't know if the city council at this point is in a position to interpret the building code differently than the building official. If you disagree with the building official's interpretation, you appeal it to the state.
Which is another step that we've been going through, so many steps. What would be really great
Then appeal it.
is, I know, but how about you guys as a city support that? I know that you do, but how about from all of you to help us do that so the state knows that you support it? Because when I talk to the state fire marshal's office, they're like, that's a local jurisdiction. That is not us. I've talked to them many times.
Interpretation of the state building code ultimately is the responsibility of the state. And as I said, if you think that the building official is interpreting it incorrectly, the process is to appeal.
So we should have started with the state and not the city?
This is the process. You start with the city and you end with the state.
So-
If you disagree with it.
Fire marshal's department.
That's the process.
All right.
Tom?
Yeah, I think I understand where Rolf is coming from, that, you know, this is the process that has to happen. You know, and again, I support the project, 100%, you know, I think it's fabulous. But I think our power is somewhat limited, but before I were to make any kind of a choice, I'd want to learn more about, you know, these other homes that have been built within, you said, the last year or two. I'd like to see, you know, I'd like to hear from their staff and board and whatnot, and on what their process looked like, you know, and maybe find out some more from, you know, from the building department side of it too. You know, it's a interesting situation, and we can only do so much, it sounds like, in this situation.
And I'd be happy to give you all of those. I know MASH has been working on behalf of us. The St. Paul Fire Department has been working on behalf of us, because we're now known in the state, which isn't a good thing. We're like known as the people who can't get this project done, and that's not what we want to be known for. Absolutely.
Scott, did you have a
It's
comment?
different terms used, appeal being the most common one, but also variance was something that was suggested earlier. And I don't know that those are the same things or different, but it seems to me that if there's an option for a variance, maybe we take that path. Let them appeal or not, but if we've got the ability to grant a variance regardless, well, then maybe we just take that approach and grant them a variance based on some way that can be done.
We don't have that authority. We have the authority to interpret the building code, and if you disagree with that interpretation, it's an appeal process. We have the ability to interpret the fire code, and if you disagree with that, it's a variance process, but they both go out of our hands to the state level.
I got one question for Rolf though on this one. If this is interpretation, and we interpret it wrong, and we allow them to go forward with this, and there's a fire in that home and somebody dies, do we take liability on that?
Probably.
Yeah, that's the thing I got to think about.
So there's a recommendation from the planning commission for a conditional use permit over 5 that is with building inspector and the fire department's recommendations or interpretations of the state laws, statutes in both.
I have a couple of questions too. So.
Okay. Yeah, Bud.
I'm Bud Notice. I appreciate the time you've taken tonight to discuss this. I really do appreciate that. I'm on the board of the Welcome House, and that's why I'm here. And I think as we go forward, first of all, I'm hoping that there's an attitude of getting it done. That's important. That we all agree that this is something good for our community. And to kill it or make it be very lame and not succeed would not be good. So if we go forward and have to go to the higher level in St. Paul, it also, I think, would be helpful to this cause if the city council is on record as all supporting this project. I think that would be very helpful for us to make a case when we go down to see somebody in St. Paul. I went through this one other time when the Pioneer Home was being built. And we came to the same situation where the local inspector was not approving a certain part of that project. Kind of a minor project, but it was still there and had to be approved. And we couldn't agree. And he told me to go to St. Paul and see the commissioner with some other folks. And we did. And we succeeded. And that project got resolved. It was a little work. So I'm just asking, hopefully, that we can all agree this is good. This is important. It shows Fergus Falls solves problems, and we're a welcome community. So I think that's all I'm asking tonight. If you can do that, I appreciate you not doing it tonight as a consent item. And so, what you do from here is up to you. So,
Thank you, Bud. Jim and then Anthony. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
I completely support the project. I've been on the board of the Halfway House for a number of years, so I know what good happens from these homes. And I would make a motion that we send a letter of support along with their appeal to the state of Minnesota.
There's a motion for a letter of support for their project along with their appeal to the state of Minnesota. Would someone like to second that motion? Scott, second. We'll vote on that. And we'll talk about the resolution. Is that?
Yeah, I had a few questions because equally the home says it's for single pregnant women. Will there be any children in the house? So that won't count. So all of a sudden 5 becomes 6, as it were, right? And then my other question was, what supervision will there be at the home?
We're working through that right now, trying to figure out when we can open. But we have a director right now who will be overseeing the house, and then we're have a mentor program. So we'll have adults, caring adults who want to come and mentor the women. Ideally, and then we'll have a part-time staff person too. Ideally, we're trying to find 24-hour staff, which was what our goal is. But if $50,000 comes out of this, because trying to financially operate these programs are really, really, really difficult. I'm also on the board of Matthew House, which is an incredible program, and thank you for your support on what they have been doing. They're really hard to cash flow, which is why people aren't doing them. And so that is the goal. But part of that is sober houses, a lot of them aren't staffed 24/7 because then it becomes a halfway house. So we're trying to find that balance of supports, but it will be supervised for sure. So.
And then my other question is, like, if we pass this resolution, does that actually help you or hinder you? Because if we pass this resolution, then that says you have to do this, and then we'd have to undo it.
Yeah, I was thinking of the same thing, and it would seem to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you guys are they can appeal without us passing this resolution for the conditional use permit. So if we have the motion in a second to support their project because we believe these are important for the city of Fergus Falls, let the appeal process go through, and then we'll take it back up with the conditional use permit at that time.
Need a conditional use permit.
But does that stop them opening, though?
Terms are going to change. It's going to just say you're subject to all, state and federal or state laws. So I mean, what's before you is to approve a conditional use permit. It just keeps it moving forward. And the conditional use permit, as it sits now, just says that you got to comply with the laws, and the interpretation of the building official says, and by the way, the laws as it relates to sprinkler systems requires it. So it doesn't change anything if you.
Because if they don't meet those requirements, then it's null and void, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, the building official gets to make those decisions. That's what you have your building official
Sure.
make.
Okay.
Your Honor, I think we have to reiterate, they have the ability to operate today up to 5 people. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
So, it's not a moot point. They can operate today, and I just want to be clear, the city's not saying don't operate. The city's saying to be able to go more than 5, you need the conditional use permit, but you also need to follow the code. So I don't want to be misleading to the public, but when we say we can't get open, they can open today with up to 5 people. We just have to be crystal clear about that.
Jim.
And mine was not a resolution, it was a motion supporting what they're doing.
Supporting the project.
It doesn't lock us into anything, it's just
Yep.
our support is there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we should.
But there is a resolution on the table regarding.
No, there is not.
Yeah.
No one's made.
Nobody's made
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
So there's a motion and a second of support from the city council for their project, just a general support for the sober home and for the welcome house. So let's take that up now. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. So I guess the decision then is, does the council
Does anyone wish to offer a resolution?
resolution?
I would make the resolution.
On the
Approve the
conditional
conditional
use
use permit.
Thank you, Anthony.
I'll second.
Thank you, Krista. Further discussion? Scott?
I just wanted to ask one more point to clarify something that Brent was kind of leading toward, and that is there anything else that they could do to the building that would satisfy the code that would essentially eliminate the need for a sprinkler? Could they add an exit? Could they widen a doorway? Is there some other aspect that could be done, for $500 rather than $50,000?
I think they need to talk to their architect about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I think that would be an important point to find out. maybe there's another way to meet the code without doing a sprinkler.
Right.
Justin.
And I would just like to thank Tammy and Bud for your comments. I think you've heard good conversation tonight, and I think I can speak for myself. I'm totally supportive of the project. It's unfortunate we have an interpretation, and it's not in favor of moving forward to have up to 10 people, but that's why hopefully this appeal process is the process we go through together, and I would certainly support that, obviously, going forward. So thank you.
Everyone good? Roll call, please.
Fish.
Yes.
Pickford.
Yes.
Lundey.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Arneson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Under ordinance and resolutions, tonight we have the first reading of ordinance 31 8th series dealing with storm water management. We would just need someone to introduce that this evening.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you, Anthony. We also have a first reading of ordinance number 32 8th series regarding THC ordinance. We'll need someone to introduce. Caroline? Scott, did you have a,
I'd like to make a couple comments on that one, if I could.
please do.
And, perhaps I was wrong in missing the opportunity to ask you to add this to new business, and if so, then maybe we'll end up having to address that in some way. But the question that we're being asked about for this resolution has to do with zoning. And as we were asked to deal with the question of this THC business, and it was all about where the business was going to be and how it might be placed in what district and all of that. But that doesn't really answer any sort of question as to licensing or permitting. And we've got licensing and permitting requirements for businesses that sell alcohol and tobacco, but we don't for businesses that handle this THC. We don't have anything under that umbrella as far as I know. So if we do, I need to learn about that, but it seems to me that we either need to start another process to address that question or somehow incorporate that into this question.
Yes, Rolf?
Let's perhaps have a motion to staff to address licensure of this and come back with a recommendation. I think it makes sense to look at licensing this. And we have actually been looking at that. So maybe the response is to, have the first reading on this, but also pass a motion to staff directing that we look into the licensure issue and come back to council with a recommendation for licensure.
And that sounds appropriate to me. I think that, and I wasn't necessarily looking to, squash the zoning question. I see that still has to be answered. And so, upon your recommendation, I'd like to make a motion that we have staff investigate the licensing and permitting for THC products.
Thank you. Scott, someone like to second that?
I'll second that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Justin. Andrew, I know you.
Yeah, I just want to add a little context as well. As you may know, well, let me back up. When we talked about this the first time, the city council didn't seem to have an appetite at that time to get too deep into licensing and regulation. We had some visitors that were very clear they don't want any additional regulation at the city level. And so the planning commission was just asked to look at zoning. So that's the background there. But since that time, Ottertail County has been discussing a proposed moratorium on THC products countywide. They have a public hearing coming up in 2 weeks from tonight about that topic. But what they are doing is they're allowing a city or a municipality to opt out of that moratorium by resolution if they address 4 or 5 different things in their local ordinance. And I've been in communication with county staff and county commissioners and have thanked them for their ability to include the off-ramp for cities and allow that local control. I think that's important, especially to Fergus Falls as a community of this size. So I guess my point is leading to ask Councilmember Kwame and Councilmember Arneson if they would amend the motion to direct staff to address the 4 or 5 things included in that off-ramp from the moratorium and ensure that you guys have something to consider to put in place to opt out of the moratorium should you want to do that and allow our existing businesses that are selling these products to continue. So it might be a little bigger than licensing and I don't remember what your motion was, but it'll look at compliance checks, permitting, sales controls and some other things that we would currently have within our tobacco ordinance that would be required by the county. So my friendly advice, I guess, would be to expand that motion just a little bit so we can cover our bases now proactively and be prepared for that.
Scott, you all right with amending that motion?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was my intent, was to essentially incorporate the kinds of controls that we have for alcohol. We're talking about THC edibles and beverages and beverage. It's ought to have the same kind of controls, the same kind of background checks, the same kind of things that are included in those code requirements. And so I thought that's what I was asking for.
Perfect. That would be sufficient then. And just one more comment, Your Honor. Since the city discussed this last, or the council, I should say, a lot of communities have adopted ordinances, so there's a lot of reference material out there now. So it's not going to be a lot of heavy lifting for us to put something together. The first time we discussed it, we were probably the first community in the state that ventured down that road. So since that time has passed, there's a lot of guidance out there. So
Thanks, Andrew. So with that, there's a motion to direct staff to look at counties' regulation and compliance checks, licensure, et cetera. Any further questions? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
We still need, I'll offer the first reading of the
think
ordinance. Or did
Caroline.
Scott do it? Oh, yeah.
Caroline did.
It got done. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
But I'd allow you to do the first read, offer the next one, Anthony.
Okay, I'll do the next
For the
one then.
first reading of ordinance 33/8 series downtown Riverfront Phase 2 bonds.
Okay.
I will make that.
Thank you. Thank you.
In
I
that
didn't want
case.
you to feel left out. All right. All right, good. Item number 4 is a resolution authorizing staff to enter into a memorandum of understanding between the wastewater treatment plant of the city of Fergus Falls and the MPCA as part of the statewide monitoring plan for PFAS. That's right. So, would someone we had this discussion on Wednesday morning. I think there's some, maybe some further comments by the council, but would someone like to have a resolution for discussion?
I'll make that.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Justin. Anyone have any further thoughts since Wednesday, Anthony?
Yeah, strange enough, it's literally like the EPA. I think I've got 3 emails in the last kind of week since we talked about this from the EPA. And 3M has just settled a case for clearing up in another state, but into the multi-millions. So I think, ultimately, working with the agency on this is probably a better way than fighting them, because it's going to come regardless of whether we do it voluntarily or we get drugged into it. So at least this way, 50% of our costs at this stage are covered by the agency. But I suspect that it'll end up a little bit like, tobacco, where they'll end up kind of claiming off the companies that are the biggest polluters.
Voluntarily, that's also AKA for no funds.
Yep.
It's on our head.
Yep.
Scott?
When we voted on this on Wednesday, my vote was no, but it was kind of overrun by the conversation, so I don't know that that was picked up. But I'm not going to support it this time either, because I think for the same reason that Jim pointed out, voluntarily means we can voluntarily not do it too. And I think I'd like to see them come up with the money, even though they're not talking about a lot of money on this one. And I mean, just the process is, I guess, what bothers me on this one. When they come along and say, we'd like you to do this, and it's not going to cost you much, so just kind of go along with us on this. And I don't like the process. I'm not willing to go along with it.
Thanks, Scott. Any other comments, questions? Roll call, please.
Fish.
Yes.
Edward.
Yes.
Tony.
No.
Lucas.
yes.
Thompson.
No.
Ferguson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Item number 5 is a resolution authorizing city staff and the city attorney to negotiate a purchase agreement with Otter Tail Power Company for the purchase of real property northwest of Pigsit Dam. And we'll call on our city engineer, Brian Ybarra. Good evening, Brian.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. Yes, Otter Tail Power has reached out to the city. They're requesting a small tract of land for the purpose of installing a permanent electrical substation facility for their, I believe it's in association with their new express feeder project. The subject land is located within the old abandoned wastewater treatment plant that's also city-owned, just west of Pisgah Dam, Tower Road. If you refer to the map to either exhibit here, you can kind of see a small exhibit of what they're requesting. Not all the land, but like I mentioned, approximately 0.03 acres of land with also a permanent ingress and egress easement for this facility. As you can see, this a portion of this property lies above our old wastewater treatment plant. Back in about 2019, the city council initiated demolition of this project. However, funds did not proceed with pursuing that because we had some other priorities as well. But if the city does accept this letter of intent and authorize us to start the purchase agreement, we'd also be looking forward to finishing this process and demolishing the entire wastewater treatment plant. But that'll also be coming before you. But I'd also recommend that we do proceed in that manner with the entire site as a piecemeal approach, just for what Otter Tail Power is requesting. Also in the letter of intent, there's some things the city needs to do as far as the environmental site assessment phase 1. I'll also procuring quotes for this as well, and I'll also be bringing that back to the city council. But all in all, I'm requesting authorization for city staff and city attorney to negotiate a purchase agreement with Otter Tail Power Company for this property. We of course will be bringing this back to you for final approval, if acceptable, along with anticipated schedules for each party as well. So I'll open up to any questions you might have, Your Honor.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone have any questions for Brian?
All off
Off of the resolution. Someone like to second the resolution?
Second.
Thank you. Scott, go ahead.
You mentioned as far as the possible demolition of the plant and all that, and how we might get involved in that going forward. I don't see any problem with selling the property out to Power. I think that as they continue to develop this, it's a good thing. When it comes to the point where we have to decide whether to spend the money on demolishing the whole plant or just what is necessary to sell them what they need, I expect that we will hear from people that would rather see us put the money into our road repairs than into demolition of a plant that nobody goes down there anyway. So when that time comes, we'll have to have a pretty good case for why it makes sense to do this and not put the money into roads, because I'm thinking we're going to hear about that.
Thanks, Scott. Bill?
Yeah, as far as roads versus the old sewer plant, these funds are in the sewer fund, and we couldn't take them out and put them in roads because they're for the sewer plant, used for the sewer plant, and so that's part of our whole fund accounting where we keep everything separate according to the regulations. And so since the revenues in that fund were generated from the sewer plant business, we only spent them on sewer plant business, which we would do this project directly out of the sewer plant fund, so.
And when the time comes, we'll expect that there's enough there to do this project?
Yep, we have it in there now. We've carried it in our CIP for a while, so when the time is right, then we can do that, so.
Well, that's the case I think we need to make. Thanks.
Yeah.
Anthony?
I mean, are we actually, is the demolition required for what Otter Tail Power is looking at? I mean, because obviously it looks like there's kind of 2 or 3 pieces there.
Part of the purchase agreement would require us to do that and provide a fairly clean site. Otherwise, that would be a contingency from Otter Tail Power. And I think we're required to decommission the plant. And it's not whether we can do it, it's just a matter of when we can do it. And so I think what you're proposing is this is a pretty good triggering event just to go ahead and do what we got to do to decommission it.
So we would be looking at cleaning up the entire site, not just the portion that Otter Tail Power requires.
Councilmember, yes, that's to be determined, yes. Like I said, when we initiated in 2019, it was the entire plan. This is probably more of a catalyst to start going in this direction, because we actually do have somewhat of a plan for redevelopment on the property. And I just want to know too that this plant has been, I'd have to look, decommissioned for quite some time, abandoned. It is rather a very hazardous spot too as well for any general public that may enter into that premise. So I believe it'd be a good time.
Thank you.
But of course, we can bring this back when we have those costs, if acceptable, we can develop some preliminary costs for partial or entire as well.
And obviously, it doesn't seem like $500 an acre is very much money. That's all.
Well, Your Honor, Councilmember Hicks. So the thought is they would be removing the substation from the dairy property,
Right.
cleaning that up so it can be redeveloped. In exchange, they're going to locate that sub here. And so the thought is they're going to sell us that property for $500. We're going to sell them this property for $500, and it's a wash. We literally pulled that number out of thin air because they have to justify it to all the other communities within their service territory.
Right.
So that's the thought behind that. It's just a swap and a wash.
And if I may, of course, Otter Tail Power would need the new facilities on operational before they decommission the other ones as well.
Okay.
Those timelines are something we're going to have to sit down and refine.
Thank you, Brian. So there's a resolution for the city attorney and city staff to negotiate that purchase agreement with Otter Tail Power. All in favor of that resolution? I'm sorry, roll call, please.
Fish.
Yes.
Hager.
Yes.
Conley.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Ferguson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
The resolution is approved. Under presentation of claims, tonight we have claims in the amount of $3,785,570.84. If there's any questions, we'll direct them to our finance director, Bill Sonmore.
I will offer a resolution to pay the bills.
Thank you, Jim.
I'll second.
Thank you, Krista. Roll call, please.
Fish.
Yes.
Hager.
Yes.
Conley.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Ferguson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. There are no board, committee, department reports. There are no reports from staff or administrative officers. There is no old, unfinished, or new business that I'm aware of this evening. One major announcement Lynn has, there's an election tomorrow.
If you didn't hear it already, there's an election tomorrow.
So-
If you haven't voted yet, please get out and vote tomorrow. It'll be, polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. We have 100 election judges. We're down to 97. I need to go recruit 3 more quick tonight. They're employing place, but we are all set and ready to roll tomorrow. So
All right.
everyone just help.
7 a.m. to 8 p.m. tomorrow. Thanks, Lynn, to you and all your team for everything you do to make that successful. And get out and vote, everyone. We're adjourned.
Lynn, about what time will the results be in, by 10?
I wonder if you can get a swimming pool liner big enough to fit in each one of those, and there's your